Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Carruth Writer, and today we're going to be taking a look back at the 2009 movie titled Perrier's Bounty. It is an Irish crime thriller comedy that runs for 88 minutes long. It is directed by Ian Fitzgibbon, and it is produced by Elizabeth Carlson, Alan Maloney, and Stephen Woolley, and is distributed by Optimum Releasing. The script was written by Mark O'Rowe. The score was done by David Holmes, and it was edited by Tony Crownston. The stars of the movie are Cillian Murphy, Brendan Gleason, Jim Broadbent, Jodie Whitaker, Liam Cunningham, and the narration was done by Gabriel Byrne. The story goes a little something like this. Michael McRae, played by Cillian Murphy, is a slacker who lives in a slum apartment, and he is seen asleep on a dirty mattress, who gets rudely awakened by two thugs who demand that Michael has until tonight to give them the money that he owes to their mob leader, Darren Perrier, played by Brendan Gleason, or else they will have to take matters personally. So Michael ventures off to try to look for where he can get the money, while ignoring his friend Brenda, played by Jodie Whitaker, who lives downstairs from him. At a pool hall called Delgado's, he's looking for a guy who only goes by the name of the Mutt, played by Liam Cunningham, in hopes that he will give Michael a loan, but was to no avail. Suddenly some meter maids come by and clamp the boot on Michael's car, with Michael getting away from them. As Michael was heading home, he runs into his father, played by Jim Broadbent, and his father shows up to tell his son that he is dying of cancer and wants to win his love back to him. The two eventually chat in the pub, even though they don't have the strongest father-son relationship. But then he overhears where the Mutt is hiding, and eventually Michael abandons his father to go to another pub to find the Mutt. Michael comes to terms with Brenda's boyfriend Shamey, played by Pedrak Delaney, and reprimands that he ends his relationship with her if he's going to continue seeing other girls. Michael meets the Mutt for a loan, but only gets shafted, and eventually he gets brutally attacked by Shamey, but Michael fights back. So as Michael leaves, the Mutt eventually blackmails Michael to team up with him and his accomplice Dinny to commit a burglary, and if he manages to pull through, he will give him a loan, but only until next morning. Michael agrees. The robbery was a success, and Michael is promised 10,000 euros, which will be rewarded to him. Suddenly the thugs from the opening scene crash into Michael's car, but Michael somehow escapes them. He goes to his apartment to look for his pistol, but Brenda stole it as a ploy for her to commit suicide because of her boyfriend dumping her. The thugs mercilessly beat Michael until Brenda shoots one of them while the other one escapes. Jim tells Michael and Brenda that they need to find a place to bury him. So Michael, Brenda, and Jim bury the thug in the countryside, and while Michael and Brenda sleep in Brenda's car, Jim, who's an insomniac, fearing that if he sleeps he might die, decides to stay awake, looking over the skyrise of downtown Dublin. At Perrier's stakeout, it is revealed that the two thugs were not just partners in crime, they also were lovers. So Perrier consoles to the surviving thug and says that he casts no judgment against the surviving thug's orientation, and that in his honor he will place a €10,000 bounty to kill both Michael and Brenda or anybody who aligns themselves with them. Meanwhile, Jim goes on to admit that he is not dying of cancer, but had an epiphany of seeing the Grim Reaper, fearing that if the next time he falls asleep, he will likely die. Michael tells Brenda that her car must be burned, and as they were on their way heading to the city, but then a rainstorm erupts. So Michael, Brenda, and Jim decide to take shelter at a farm nearby, only to be evacuated by a strange farm girl who called the police, accusing Michael for raping her. The police show up, and just as they were about to arrest Brenda, Jim grabs Michael's gun and points at the police officers, and eventually they go off in their car. Michael gets a call from the mutt to tell him that he has his cash. Meanwhile, in the city, a young man in a stolen car pulls over, assuming that Michael, Jim, and Brenda are cops, but tells them that they're not, and they eventually swap rides. Along the way, for Michael to comfort Brenda, who still has feelings for her ex-boyfriend, Jim befriends a group of dog trainers and comes back to pick up Michael and Brenda. The mutt and his accomplice eventually betray Michael, and Jim eventually knocks out Mutt and Dinny, and Brenda eventually steals the $30,000. Michael, Jim, and Brenda make a narrow escape. Meanwhile, I think it was back at Delgado's, Michael offers Jim some cocaine, and then he goes off snorting in the bathroom. Michael fires up his pistol, and a shootout commences because Perrier and his gang enter the premises. Michael and Brenda try to get back in the car, only to find it was given the boot, but somehow manages to escape in Shamey's car. So at Delgado's, Perrier and his gang, along with Mutt and Dinny, get confronted by the dog trainers. As an act of unremorsefulness, Perrier kills the two dogs. Jim is eventually abducted by Perrier and his gang and is now taken hostage. At a nearby hotel, Michael and Brenda receive a call from Jim, who's been beaten badly, and that he's going to go to take a nap, implying that he will die. Michael rushes to Perrier's hideout, leaving Brenda at the hotel. Michael goes to Perrier's hangout with the €30,000. The mutt demands his money so he can leave. Perrier demands Michael's death will be slow and his father's will be fast. Michael escapes while the mutt gets killed. Michael defends himself against Perrier's cronies by clubbing them with a golf stick. Michael gets back in the car with Jim, and Perrier eventually shoots Jim in the chest, and Jim eventually dies. Michael aims at Perrier, but wounds the remaining two thugs. Just as Perrier is about to shoot a defenseless Michael, Brenda and the dog trainers let the dogs loose, chasing after Perrier, and the dogs eventually maul him to death. They take Michael to a veterinarian to fix his wounds. At the burial, Michael, Brenda, and the dog trainers mourn Jim and the shot dogs, and Michael and Brenda eventually show love for each other and eventually go to County Clare, where he was raised, and as the camera fades, it appears as though as if he is waving to his deceased mother. What did I think about this movie? Granted, well, this movie definitely had its share of moments, but it's still more dependent in the comedy spectrum, which is a bit misleading in its billing as an action comedy, and the humor might be a little more easier to decipher if you were from the land of the Celtics. Intermission helmsman Ian Fitzgibbon exhibits Perrier's Bounty as an overall letdown, as it merely touches the pinnacles of comedy that Intermission displayed, in spite of a very pedestrian, color-by-the-lines plot. Cillian Murphy, of course, stars as a young bloke who's in a financial predicament, as he owes over 10,000 euros to a local hoodlum. After several attempts in earning the dough, his neighbor unintentionally murders one of the hoodlum's accomplices. This puts Michael, his neighbor, and his father, played by Jim Broadbent, in a deeper hole as they are now on the run. Sure, it sounds like a crime caper with a touch of humor, but overall it's a misnomer. It's practically just a standard dark comedy, as Perrier, played by Gleason, has a few minutes of screen time, and his presence is seen during the dying hours of the film. The centerpiece of the film is on the failed relationship between Michael and his father Jim. Some of the humor is quite hilarious, but most of them are like staler than old age bread. It somehow starts to fizzle in the middle, but recovers in the conclusion when the hoodlums start to become the center of attention. The acting is, overall very impressive, though Jim Broadbent's accent is a bit hard to decipher at times. The main scene stealer, of course, is the star of the movie, Cillian Murphy, who really shows his comical talent, and Michael was actually the funniest of the zany bunch, who practically spends most of his time in the movie on the run from hoodlums, gangsters, junkies, and so on. It's not a terrible film by far, but it just lacks the qualitative humor that Intermission possesses. And knowing the ensemble of talented Irish performers, this movie should have been 10 times better. And, this was a character-driven film, and I'll just sort of run down of who I think that were standouts. Well, first of all, I thought Jim Broadbent needed some much well-deserved comic relief, even though, it was hard to decipher through his accent. Cillian Murphy was also quite convincing as a young man who's constantly on the run, who seems to hang around with the wrong crowd. Jodie Whitaker, I thought she was kind of bland. I don't think she was really needed too much. Gleason was over the top, even though he kind of looked like kind of a bit of a cartoon character type mobster. Of course, I can't compare him to Marlon Brando's Vito Corleone. That's like comparing prime steak to hamburger meat. But, he turned out a pretty good performance. The action was intense. It was never boring. The action is like smack dab right in your face. The humor was quite sublime. The action was exciting. Never a dull moment in this movie. If I was to give it a scale out of 10, I would give it a 7 out of 10. It's not up there with Intermission, but it's still a fun watch. I guess this kind of ends my writer review. Thank you all for listening. Please subscribe to my channel And do write back to me. Remember, be kind, be courteous, and I will be back with another review. So until next time, keep watching those movies, and take care of yourselves. Goodbye.